No one at Caldwell Regional could say exactly when Naomi Strickland started. She wasn't on the schedule the way new hires usually were. Announced in advance, fussed over by the unit director. Given a proper orientation lunch in the cafeteria with the bad coffee and the good donuts. She was simply there one morning. A little before 6, already in her scrubs. Badge clipped square to her chest. Reading through 3 patient charts at once, like she was looking for something specific instead of just getting acquainted. Nobody had trained her on the new charting software. Nobody had to. Her hands moved like she'd done this for 20 years. Not 2 months. The trauma unit at Caldwell had its own particular flavor of cruelty. The kind that grows in places where everyone is smart and tired and competing for scraps of respect they'll never actually take home with them. Staff Sergeant. That was what the senior nurses started calling her behind her back. Not kindly. After someone noticed the way she stood at parade rest without realizing it, hands clasped behind her. Weight even on both feet waiting. It wasn't meant as a compliment. Charge nurse Brenda Okafor noticed first that Naomi never lingered in the break room. She didn't complain about the new scheduling software. Didn't join the running commentary about which doctors were impossible to work with. Didn't bring in baked goods for her birthday. Because nobody actually knew when her birthday was. She showed up, she worked, and she left. And somewhere in that silence Brenda decided there was something wrong with her. She's got a flat affect. Brenda told the others one slow Tuesday. Like she was diagnosing something. Like she's not all the way present. You ever notice that? They noticed it. They talked about it more than they probably should have. Dr. Aldous Whitmore, attending in the trauma unit for going on 19 years, had a particular contempt reserved for nurses, who acted like they knew more than they were credentialed for. He caught Naomi placing a central line on a multi-trauma patient with a kind of economy of motion he hadn't seen outside of academic conferences, clean, fast, no wasted movement, and instead of asking where she'd learned to do that, he made a comment to the resident standing next to him about how sometimes the new ones get lucky early, and it makes them overconfident. He didn't check her file. He didn't ask her name twice. He simply filed her under watch that one and moved on with his rounds. Naomi didn't react. She never reacted. She absorbed it the way she absorbed everything. The busy work tasks handed to her instead of more senior nurses out of some unspoken hierarchy. The comments made just loud enough to be overheard. The assumption that her quiet was emptiness rather than discipline. And she filed it away somewhere and kept working, eyes already moving to whatever was coming through the doors next. Her locker, if anyone had ever looked inside it, which nobody had, held almost nothing personal. A spare set of scrubs folded into a tight square. A trauma assessment card, edges gone soft from handling, and tucked into the back corner. A coin, dull bronze, worn smooth on one side, that she never once mentioned to anyone, because nobody ever asked. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the whispers turned into something sharper. A 16-year-old came in post-appendectomy, recovering stable, nothing dramatic until he wasn't. His oxygen dropped without warning during a routine vitals check, and the floor went from calm to controlled chaos in about 4 seconds. Naomi was the nearest body. By the time the rapid response team arrived 90 seconds later, she had already repositioned him, established a clear airway, and identified what turned out to be early signs of a pulmonary embolism, the kind of catch that could have gone unnoticed for another 20 minutes. By someone less sure of what they were looking at, and 20 minutes would have been long enough. She stepped back the second the team took over, went back to her station, picked her charting back up exactly where she'd left it. Dr. Whitmore, reading the incident report later that day, sat with it longer than he wanted to admit. A nurse with 4 months on this unit had caught something 3 more senior people on that floor had walked right past. He didn't ask her how. He told a colleague over coffee that she'd gotten lucky twice now, and the colleague, not particularly invested either way, repeated it to someone else. And by Friday the story wasn't a catch anymore. It was a coincidence, a fluke. Something small enough to not have to think about. Naomi heard about it the way she heard about most things said around her. She didn't say anything. She ate lunch by herself most days, a habit. Nobody had bothered trying to break anymore. With a paperback medical text dog-eared in the back pocket of her scrubs. Across the cafeteria one afternoon, Brenda and 2 of the younger nurses were laughing about something. And one of them glanced over at Naomi and laughed a little harder. Naomi didn't look up. She turned a page, That same night, 400 miles away, a secure line rang inside a building. Most people in Caldwell's parking lot had never heard of and wouldn't have believed if they had. The call lasted 3 minutes. The voice on the other end used a name that wasn't the one on Naomi's badge, a call sign, a designation that hadn't been spoken aloud in almost 2 years, and asked if she was available. She said she would be, she always was. The helicopter came in on a Friday morning, low over the tree line behind the hospital, banking hard onto the rooftop pad, in a way that made it instantly clear. This wasn't a standard medevac transfer. The sound arrived before the aircraft did. A deep mechanical thunder that rattled the glass along the corridor connecting the ER to pre-op. Nurses stopped mid-task. A resident froze with a chart still open in his hands. Someone near the nurses' stations said the word, military, like it. Explained everything and nothing at once. And the hallway started filling with people drawn toward the windows. The way people are always drawn toward things they don't understand. The rotors hadn't fully stopped when the side door slid open, and 2 figures in full tactical gear came out at a controlled run, moving a gurney between them, with the kind of practiced urgency that doesn't come from training alone. 3 more fanned out behind them, forming a loose perimeter around the entrance that nobody on staff felt inclined to question, mostly because of what was strapped to their vests. Naomi was already in the corridor. Nobody had paged her. Nobody had called down to tell her specifically to be there. She'd simply heard the rotor wash change pitch as it descended. Recognized the cadence of it, the angle, the urgency baked into the sound self. And she'd started moving before her brain had fully caught up with her feet. She met the team at the bay doors, badge swinging against her chest, and the man at the front, built like he'd been carved out of granite, face somewhere between exhaustion and barely restrained fury, stopped mid-stride when he saw her. Something passed over his expression that none of the watching staff could quite name. Not relief, exactly. Recognition, the particular kind that exists only between people who've survived the same impossible things in the same impossible places and never once talk about it once the sun comes up. Strickland. Not a question, a confirmation. What do we have? She was already moving toward the gurney, already scanning the field dressings, the IV lines, the monitor leads taped on, with the rough competence of someone who'd done it under conditions far worse than a hospital hallway. What they had was a combat medic, the man responsible for keeping an entire team breathing in the field, caught in the blast radius of an IED during a training exercise that had gone sideways fast. Abdominal trauma, internal bleeding, pressure dropping in a way that didn't leave much room for delay. He'd been stabilized just enough by the men around him to survive the flight, but not enough to fix what was actually wrong inside him. Command had made exactly one call about where to send him. They'd asked for her by name. Dr. Whitmore appeared at the end of the hall, drawn by the noise, walking toward the bay with the unhurried authority of a man who assumed every emergency in his building belonged to him by default. He made it 3 steps before the lead operator, without turning around, without raising his voice past a flat, even register, said, "Sir, step back. We requested a specific provider." Whitmore stopped like he'd hit glass. He looked at Naomi, already gloved, already directing the trauma bay team, with a quiet total authority that didn't ask permission from anyone. Her voice carrying the particular weight of someone who had spent a long time being the last thing standing between a person and the end of their life. She wasn't louder here, she wasn't harder. She was just, for the first time anyone on that floor had ever seen, completely and entirely herself. The surgery ran just under 3 hours. Naomi direct at, assist, and at 2 separate moments made calls that left the attending surgeon quietly rattled by how fast and how certain she was. When it was finally over, when the medic was stable and breathing on his own, and the men waiting outside the OR doors had stopped clenching their fists, the lead operator found her at the scrub sink. He thanked her. She nodded once, the way she did everything. Economical, no wasted motion. He started to say something else. Something about the old team. About people who still asked about her. And she stopped him, gently, before he could finish. "I'm just the quiet one on the 3rd floor, she said, and something close to a smile crossed her face for the first time in 2 months. Down the corridor, Brenda Okafor stood very still. A chart held loosely in one hand that she hadn't actually looked at in almost 15 minutes. Watching Naomi walk back toward the nurse's station, like nothing unusual had just happened, like a Black Hawk hadn't just crossed 4 states to find one specific woman. buried in a hospital full of people who'd spent 2 months deciding she wasn't worth their attention. Like that coin in her locker, the one nobody had ever asked about, didn't have a trident stamped into the bronze. Nobody on that floor laughed at the quiet nurse again. Some lessons come with warning. Some arrive on a rooftop, rotors still turning, and leave the room a little smaller than it was before.